as he may not have entirely appreciated the post, particularly as he spent the next 5 weeks in intensive care being treated for traumatic brain injury. Fucking hell, poor dude. It's perhaps no surprise that Maynard went on to sue Crystal McGee for causing serious injury with her vehicle, and a charge to which McGee pled no contest. But he also took the step of suing Snap Inc. on the grounds that they knew that the speed filter was being used in unlawful speed contests by morons, but did nothing to prevent it. I think that's a pretty good case right there. A Georgia court initially ruled that Snap Inc. were under no obligation to prevent the consequences of deliberate misuse, noting that companies could potentially be crippled by the weight of being held responsible for every single accident caused by reckless misuse of a product or service. Yes, but when you are encouraging recklessness, that's a little different to just reckless use of a product that doesn't encourage recklessness, isn't it? But the story's not over yet, as the Georgia Supreme Court took up the case in 2022 after observing that intentional misuse should not necessarily protect a company from liability, and that manufacturers have a reasonable duty of care to reduce foreseeable risks. And this is definitely something that was foreseeable, in my opinion. It's an intriguing case with potentially game-changing implications, but as this case has already dragged on for years, I suspect we'll be waiting a while longer to hear the final outcome. One final interesting point here is that while Snap Inc. has always denied any responsibility for the accidents and fatalities related to the speed filter feature, they later capped the top speed at which posts could be shared to 35 miles per hour before quietly dropping the feature altogether. The official reason was that nobody was using it anymore, which may well have been true after the speed was capped at 35 miles an hour. Yes, yeah. This kind of speaks, in my opinion, to the fact that this was foreseeable. Another controversial Snapchat feature is the Snap Map, which broadcasts your exact location in real time to everyone who follows you. This is obviously an opt-in feature, but concern grew over the fact that it wasn't initially made clear enough that the feature updates your location every single time you open the app, rather than just when you're actively taking snaps, as many may have presumed. Oh, this is how he gets busted, because he opens it, he's checking his Snapchat while murdering his parents? Oh, dude, what the
That's better. I can see the text
psycho.
now.
Don't use Snapchat while you're committing crimes. What the f***? So on the face of it, this is a feature which could well have proved surprisingly useful for the often overlooked stalker community. I believe that the processes of the feature have since been made a lot clearer, although many are still worried how young users may be unwittingly putting themselves in danger by broadcasting their location to followers they may not necessarily know. Of course, it's also a feature which could prove very useful and potentially even life-saving for parents wishing to keep close tabs on their roaming children. But in the case of Kat Melander and Chandler Halderson, Snap Map proved to be more useful in allowing Kat to keep close tabs on her roaming boyfriend. It would appear that even though Kat was looking forward to setting up a new life with Chandler in Florida, she still had some serious trust issues with him based on their past experiences, and suspected that he might be hanging around with other women when they weren't together. But she hit upon a cunning solution to help put her mind at rest. She persuaded Chandler to allow her to track his every move on Snap Map. Spying on your boyfriend's movements at any given hour of the day doesn't exactly inspire thoughts of a perfectly healthy relationship, yet it seems that Chandler readily agreed to permanently share his location with Kat, possibly in a bid to prove that he had changed his ways and that he had nothing to hide. However, Kat noticed something quite unusual on the morning of Saturday the 3rd of July. Kat had stayed at Chandler's house the previous Friday night, whilst his folks were supposedly away at the family cabin in Langley County. She had left very early on Saturday morning to head back to Cottage Grove, hoping that Chandler would accompany her. But he claimed that he had chores in the house to crack on with, so he told Kat that he'd join her at Cottage Grove later that evening for the pool party. This immediately made Kat a little suspicious. Chandler never did chores in the house. This was because Chandler was far too busy with his fake job, which meant that his parents still had to pick up the chores after they'd returned home from their real jobs. I mean, it's only fair. Chandler's such a douchebag, dude. Kat later checked Chandler's location on Snap Map at around 9 a.m. and raised a quizzical eyebrow when she saw that he wasn't at home doing chores at all. He was around 25 miles away on the banks of the Wisconsin River in Sauk County, close to a favorite swimming hole that Chandler often visited in the past. A photograph taken around a year earlier depicts a shirtless Chandler in broadly the same spot, trying to look all macho while clutching a large knife as if he's set to go hunting in the wild for his lunch. A puzzled Kat saved a screenshot of the map image to her phone to remind herself to question Chandler about it later, although it appears that she never got around to it. After Chandler was arrested the following Thursday, Kat Melander was interviewed by detectives who were keen to know if she had any suspicions that her boyfriend may have been involved in the disappearance of his parents. She insisted that Chandler would never dream of doing anything as crazy as murder his own parents, although her logic was a little off. She reckoned that he clearly loved his parents as they played Mario Kart together all the time, and she also pointed out that he would never do anything that might jeopardize his bright future at SpaceX. Oh no, Kat. I mean, it's not your fault. Why would you expect him to be full of such huge lies and capable of such heinous shit? I think generally starting from the assumption that people aren't capable of this sort of heinous shit is generally a good place to be. I mean, a person, statistically, obviously some people are, but let's just start with the assumption that most people wouldn't murder their parents. She did, however, agree to fully cooperate with the investigation and gave permission for her phone to be examined in the hope that this might help prove her boyfriend wasn't remotely shady. News for you, Kat. He is shady. The detectives quickly came across and saved the SnapMap image, which showed that Chandler was hanging around the banks of the Wisconsin State Lower Riverway early on that Saturday morning, and they naturally grew quite curious as to what exactly he had been doing there. They got their answer on the 14th of July when a full search of the area was conducted. It has to be said that most of Krista Hodderson's remains are missing to this day. But investigators came across the victim's complete right leg and left foot hidden away in patches of riverbank. An official cause of death was impossible to ascertain from just a leg and a foot, but it would seem probable that she had suffered a very similar fate to her husband. She was fatally shot with a rifle before her still-clothed body was dismembered and scattered around various wooded areas throughout southern Wisconsin. And had it not been for Snapchat, coupled with Kat's deep-rooted distrust of her own boyfriend, it's possible that investigators would have never recovered any of Krista Hodderson's body at all. Chandler was eventually charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, hiding a corpse, mutilating a corpse, and falsifying information about a missing person. But it took a little while for those charges to be filed, and in the meantime, his defense attorney, Catherine Dahl, was getting a little tetchy about how her client was still being detained without actually facing any charges. She noted, "We don't detain people without charges being filed. It's a sort of bedrock of what we do in the United States." Catherine Dahl also suggested that her client should be released back into the wild immediately without having to post bail. As she put it to the Dane County Court Commissioner, "He's a lifelong resident of Wisconsin, he's an Eagle Scout, there is no indication that he would flee whatsoever." Yeah, except the fact that he's just committed a double murder that he's on trial for. It's a pretty good reason to flee when you're looking at, well, going to prison forever. However, the clues were gradually beginning to pile up, which indicated that this particular Eagle Scout may well be more dangerous than he appeared, and that he would have had some explaining to do if he ever bothered to open his mouth again. Chandler's neighbors noted that his behavior was very odd on that night when he was knocking on doors to inquire if anyone had seen his mum and dad. Whilst it might have been assumed that Chandler was just putting on an act of worried son here to help deflect any suspicion, it may more likely be that he had an ulterior motive for his visits. The neighbors noted that he seemed more concerned about potential footage that may have been picked up by security cameras than anything else, and he was keen to borrow any such material. One neighbor revealed how Chandler became quite agitated and panicky when he was denied a request to check out the security camera footage as it had already been handed over to the police. You suspect that if Chandler had managed to get his hands on anything insightful, it would have been the last the neighbor ever saw of it. Yeah, but this is the future. You don't just oh, here's the footage. It's not going to be on a tape. It's going to be on the computer. You just stick in a pen drive and you copy it across. More clues were found in Chandler's somewhat alarming internet history on his laptop. Shortly after his parents disappeared, Chandler spent a while performing Google searches for several different variations on such terms as body found Wisconsin, women's body found in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin dismembered body found. Oh my good lord. How are you not using an incognito browser on a VPN? I don't